Okay, so here starts our grand experiment. First time I've ever tried this, but I think it should be kind of fun. Let me know if you think it worked for you. I like the fact that you can watch it when you have time and you're not stuck in a classroom, and maybe it's a little bit more efficient. So let's get on with the show. It's week 9, and this is our video version of class. And we're going to talk about a couple of different things today. First of all, we're going to talk about just a little bit of class housekeeping, including the rubric that for the final project, and just a little bit more information and to kind of cover some of the content that we've already covered. I really want to talk a little bit more about taxonomies, folksonomies, online video. We got about 2/3 through that conversation, and I just kind of want to wrap that up. We've not really talked at length about interviewing. I did it without a lot of structure, but I just want to give you a little bit more structure to kind of review what we talked about with interviewing. This is information hopefully you're going to be able to use down the line, not just for this class. And then talk a little bit about how once we have an interview, if we're going to write a script, how to leverage that script within the context of an interview. And I want to touch on production calendars. We've not really talked about how important it is to make certain you've allocated enough time. This is something that I want you to touch on in your final project, not a requirement, but it's always a good idea. You'll see in a lot of the examples from previous classes that many of them did choose to talk about production and how they plan to make certain that it's sustainable. Not just that you can crank out videos for this class, but if you were to continue the channel, how could you do it over time? And I think that's really important. And then lastly, one of the things that I really kind of want you to begin to think about as we move forward after this class is how video content fits into the larger fabric, specifically transmedia, and how we can use video as one component to larger storytelling methodologies. So that said, let's talk a little bit about group proposals. So the proposal is due basically 1 minute before midnight on Wednesday the 12th. That gives you 2 days to button up, do any fine-tuning, anything you want to do before you turn it in. You can absolutely turn it in sooner. If somebody's going to get out of Dodge for the holiday break, that's fine. Get it in as soon as you guys feel it's ready, but know that you have until essentially midnight on Wednesday the 12th. And that is your group written proposal due, and you can send it via Canvas or email. I also like, if you would, include a copy of your presentation, the PowerPoint or a PDF of your PowerPoint, however you're doing your presentation. I also like having a copy of that. It really is just a high-level reflection of what's in your proposal, but it helps me remember what you were talking about in the context of your proposal, and just kind of helps me get through things. So on Monday, what is due is you need to have your channel all buttoned up because you'll be presenting your channel. Each of you need to have your last video uploaded to that channel to be able to show it in class. And you need to present the information, your business plan, basically do a pitch the way you would pitch an investor on why investing in this idea is a good idea. And it's essentially a high-level overview of what's in your written business plan. I can't say it often enough. Practice before you come into class. It's going to give you a lot more confidence. It minimizes catastrophes and will really help you have fun with the process rather than feel it's like oral surgery or something hideous. The rubric for the class is pretty straightforward. This is in essence what you'll get back. 1 to 6 on channel coherency, 1 to 4 on branding, 0 to 4 on point of view, story, audience identification, SEO naming, and then the quality of the video. Just, are your videos pretty good? I'll talk about some of the specifics of each video, and each of you will get individual written feedback for your video, but you'll get a large overview in terms of your final project in written form, what you wrote about. It's actually much longer than what's in this example. I went through a previous one and just kind of sanitized out a lot of the information. But it's some of the notes, some of the comments that I'll make during your presentation, and then the analysis after the presentation. So just know that you're going to receive a very specific metric, and the video quality will be different for each of you because the video quality is not the video quality of the overall channel, but the video quality of your last video, separate from the final grade on that video. So just know that you're going to get a lot of feedback. So hopefully that helps give you a little bit better idea of what the rubric is, what the numbering will be, how points are allocated, and how I've weighted what is important in the within the presentation. So let's jump to taxonomies and folksonomies. We talked a little bit about this, and so some of this may be review, but I want to make certain you've got a real strong idea of how having structure to your content is really important in order for that content to be successfully distributed. The one thing you need to understand is that in order for your content to be seen, it needs to have some way for it to be distributed. It needs sort of freedom to not be bound to one thing, so that it can be shared on Facebook or shared on YouTube or Instagram or however you're looking to distribute it. And it needs to have the ability to be placed or shared where people are going to want it most, where it's most likely to be used. And if it's just kind of trapped in some sort of silo, then it's going to be invisible. The great thing is that digital content by its nature has the potential to be widely distributed. It's not tied to something like a television station where you had to sit down at a set time to watch it. It's not tied to a specific format like needing a VHS player. It's no longer bound by some of the physical limitations, a physical product, or fixed timetables. It also needs to be flexible so that it can be seen on different devices, in different platforms. It can be seen on a TV, it can be seen on a phone, it can be seen in a variety of different channels. And so therefore, the more structure you put into your content, the more likely it is to be shared, the freer it becomes. So in this case, it might be your website, or it could be a video. You need to attach enough hooks to be brought into your content so that websites like Google can scrape it, figure out what's on there, and then begin to share it. And that's why if you create something, it can then be shared in other sites like Reddit. It then can end up in YouTube, in LinkedIn, in Pinterest. We're going to be able to see that it can be embedded into Blogspot and WordPress and Dig and StumbleUpon, that this content, by having the structure, that structure is shared across all platforms. And that's what gives it the ability to be nimble. That the more structure you put into it, the freer it becomes, the more nimble it becomes. And so the things you need to make certain are descriptions of these assets, things that are easily shared. And that sort of structure and definition allows your content to be atomized, to be shared freely and widely. And it cuts out all the guesswork that a search engine or something is like, well, now wait a minute, what is this? What's going on? And that's why video metadata is so important. As I talked about a few weeks ago, The description is really important. That first sentence, sentence and a half, needs to be really clear, really concise. And as I indicated before, think of it as the first sentence, sentence and a half that shows up in a Google search. Needs to be declarative. You can't bury the lead, and it needs to include the keywords that you think people will be searching for, that it offers an answer to a question or a problem they're trying to pose. And so that's why you need to be really thoughtful about how you are attaching keywords and what you're doing, and that it's not capricious. You can use a keyword generator, but I try to be really consistent in the first 7 or 8 keywords that I've attached in. In this example, I've got a clear audio will make or break your video. You have to have good sound if you expect people to understand. In many ways, I bury the lead here because I think I really will say audio will make or break your video, but smartphones aren't very good at it. Learn how to make good audio with a smartphone. I say it, but it's just a little too far down, and I would probably rewrite this now. But my tags, video help, how to, Drew Keller tutorial, how to, story guide, those are in every video I post on this channel. And then it's specific: audio, mic, microphone, iPhone, Android, sound, Windows Phone, tips, best. These are words that people would include when creating a search in some sort of search engine or in YouTube. And then it also includes the types of microphones that I talked about, so that if somebody's looking for information on how to plug a lavalier, a lav mic, into an iPhone, it would come up. So I try to be really proactive in making certain that that metadata makes sense. Here are a few examples of some videos that I think have real significant problems. First of all, this is a video from Omaha Public Power, and it literally has no description to the video whatever. And all it is the title of the commercial. Well, you would need to know what the name of the commercial is in order to find it, and not many of us know the name of a commercial. You know the content. So the naming of this is really a problem. And then frankly, when we look at it, there's essentially no information that people can find. There are problems with the fact that their thumbnail is just the generic YouTube thumbnail. And the header that they've got up here is really denigrated. It's really low resolution, and it's really a mess. And then, as I had indicated, they have no information in this. It's just a huge problem. This one's even worse. It just says outage reporting. Uploaded, no description available. They just threw this up on the web figuring people would find it, and there's no reason. And I'm frankly surprised that it received 1,000 views. My guess is it could receive even more. This video, not a bad name for a video, only had 43 views because essentially there was no brand, there's no information. It's just a vanilla video with no information at all. So just looking at what Omaha Public Power was doing, you can see that they've really got a systematic problem with uploading videos without any branding, without any description, without any keywords, with really horrible titles. And they were wondering why people weren't engaging in their YouTube content. They just really expected they could throw it up there and people would watch, and they didn't understand why that was a problem. Bottom line, viewers are going to discover your content via search. You have to understand that search is really, really important. If you embed your content in a homepage, they may watch it, but most of your viewers are not going to come from a homepage. All of the videos I've produced, I posted either both on the homepage and in a blog post on my website. And really, that account, now, if I had a larger website, maybe that would be significant, but I got like 2% of my views via that. They weren't looking for it on my website. The blog article may have come up. It was a great way to create awareness, and I definitely for a long time was driving viewers to the YouTube site from the blog because they'd see the video and then they'd go, oh, is there more stuff? And they would go to the channel to look for it. But they're rarely starting on a homepage and they're rarely starting on a website. And so that's really why you need to understand that all of these tools that we use, all of this discovery, all of the different databases are connected. And that's why these meta tags are so critical, because the algorithms are really using these tags and your behaviors, what you've watched in the past, how long, and what you're searching for, as a way to filter the content that you're going to receive. And it's the same with your viewers. It's their behaviors and what they're searching for are the structure by which the algorithm is going to determine whether your video is going to be presented to them. And that's why keywords are so critical. So, as a review, your viewers discover content via search. Bottom line, whether it's in YouTube, whether it's in a browser, whether it's in an app, they're finding it via search. You need to make certain you've got consistent naming conventions for your videos and consistent taxonomy, folksonomy. Remember, folksonomy is just kind of the agreement within your group, how you're going to name things and describe things. And that sharing via social, if you were also sharing it on Facebook and Pinterest, LinkedIn, Twitter, it's going to elevate the search results. Both Google and YouTube, if a video is being widely is being discovered via search, is also going to promote your video that way. When we start looking at video in search, you need to make certain that if you're working for an organization or working for a company, that your naming conventions are good and your keywords are good, predominantly because you want to make certain that your content is coming up first in these search engines, that you've optimized for search engines, SEO, search engine optimization, so that if somebody is looking for Omaha Public Power, what they're coming up with is not negatives. Omaha Public Power District, mess up work, red pubes of Omaha Public, stock auction company holds, annual auction. These are not the videos Omaha Public Power wanted, but it was literally number 2, 3, and 4 in the search results for when you typed in Omaha Public Power video. These are the results, and it's because they were so inconsistent in their naming and their descriptions and those sorts of things. By and large, the search engines just didn't even really know those videos were tied to Omaha Public Power. And that's the value of being able to do this. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense about why I'm so adamant about keywords, why it's so important. And frankly, if you're going to spend the time to create content, spend the effort and the money to manage a channel, you need to make certain that folks can discover it and engage in it. Okay. So let's jump into storytelling and the video. A bit of a pivot here. We've already talked a little bit about how most of your interviews are going to be in a neutral eyeline. And we've also talked about how where you choose the interview is really important. And we talked about how choosing your location so that whomever you're talking with has context to what they're talking about. Be it in the workplace, be it within their office, whatever's going on, you need to make certain that it's really clear that we see who these people are, we've got context, what's going on, maybe family photos in the background, or a messy office versus a clean office. Sometimes the office may be a little bit more abstract, it may just be a lamp or something, but it still gives you context within the video so that you know who these people are and what's going on and what they represent. I also like to take and put people in context in their location. So if we're talking to someone in a school, we may not see identifiable students, but we have the hallway, we have what's going on, we have someone outside talking about, within the context of where they are, or just maybe a pretty location. If we are looking to put someone in an event, give an idea of how things are transpiring in the background, people walking, those sorts of things, but making certain that their face is the brightest thing in the frame. And then you've already seen part of this video, or in this case, here I am trying to use my location of the stand-up as a way to really impart important information within the video. So make certain that you're using your location to give context to your message, that it's not just against a white wall, or it is not just a random bush or a bookshelf that doesn't make any sense. Really be thoughtful about where you're going to put your interview, because that's going to help your subject matter be comfortable. Because I don't know how many of you have ever been interviewed on camera, but it's this weird existential, almost near-death experience where when the interview first starts, you're not really paying attention to the interview, the conversation's going on. It's almost like you're on the ceiling and you look down and you go, oh my God, there's a camera and there are lights and I've got a microphone and my friends are all going to pay attention. Do I look stupid? And how's my hair? Do I have broccoli in my teeth? You're thinking about everything but the content that you're supposed to be talking about. And as an interviewer, it's important that you understand that's really likely going to be the headspace they're in when the interview first starts. Consequently, you need to put them at ease. It may be that your first question is not really an answer you expect to use, but you just want to get them over the hump so that they then can start concentrating on the content instead of concentrating on the situation or the process. And so if you can get them at ease, in essence, what you're able to accomplish is you're able to get access to how they felt when making the choices they make. It becomes the heart of the story, and it gives the viewer the opportunity to understand the motivations, to get inside the head. And for some people, it can be a release. It can be sort of cathartic to talk out a difficult situation or how they came to pass on this. It may be a situation where they're really nervous. My phone's ringing. Hey, what's up?
Hey, I'm just checking
2 o'clock.
To see if you took...
Well, as the graphic said, it's now 6 hours later, and I'm going to try to jump back into this. Hopefully, I can kind of remember where I left off, and welcome to real life. So let's jump back in now that I'm done with my responsibilities at that work, so I can do what I really love, which is this work. So anyway, we were talking about why we do interviews and what we're trying to do, and essentially what I wanted to lead to was 11 survival tips for doing an interview in more or less 5 minutes. I'll try not to prattle on too long. And some of this I've talked about already, but it's really critical. Make certain you test your equipment before you arrive to the shoot. You want to make certain your batteries are good to go. You've got a memory card. You've got all the gear you want. The microphone actually plugs into your camera, and what a concept. Your microphone actually works. You know how to use the lights. You know how to use all the gear. Really make certain you've tested everything before you arrive to shoot. If I'm renting or checking out gear, I try to make certain I get it at least the day before so I can get all the batteries charged the night before and make certain I am ready to go. I've talked about this before, but it bears repeating. Your story will live and die based upon who you choose to interview. So you've got to cast it like a movie. Do your phone interview. Try to figure out if they have a great story to tell, if they seem to be comfortable in telling that story. Make certain that who you cast as your central character in somebody who can carry your story. Make certain they're comfortable in the setting. That doesn't just mean a comfortable chair. It means make certain that you put them in an environment where they're going to be able to concentrate on the task at hand. If you're doing an interview with them in their workplace and they work in a cubicle farm, and you go to do that interview with them in the cubicle farm, are they going to feel awkward because everybody around them can hear them in the interview? Is that going to be the best place? I personally like shooting, not at a cube farm, but I do like shooting people in their environment, even when their coworkers are around. It can make it feel more dynamic. But the key is that you need to control that environment and understand going in, they're going to feel awkward and going to feel a little tentative about being the center of attention. So I'll often walk in and go, after we take a look and those sorts of things, and when it seems appropriate, I'll get everybody's attention. Hey, hi you guys, my name is Drew, and I'm here doing an interview with Beth. And we're really excited that we're going to have a chance to interview with Beth, but I need your help. And so it's an opportunity to enlist everybody in the environment to help be successful, but it also lets them know what's expected of them and makes them feel like a participant, that they're contributing. And what I say is, I need your help. There are a couple of things. One, just keep doing your work. You can do exactly what you're doing, but I would like you to kind of not have really loud conversations, a lot of laughs, because we're going to hear it on the microphone. No music or watching videos on your computer, because again, we'll hear that. And, don't be silly and do like rabbit ears behind them or mug up behind them. Just do your job. Do your best to ignore us. You don't have to leave, and it'll be great. That accomplishes not only controlling the environment, it makes the person you're interviewing feel less awkward, less embarrassed. Kind of takes the pressure off them because you are owning the space, you're owning the environment, and you're taking responsibility. It's not something they necessarily asked for. It's something they agreed to do. So make certain they're comfortable in the setting. I let them know what I'm going to do in the pre-interview and then remind them when I get there, which is I'll tell them how many people are coming. Is it just me, or is it a big group of folks? So I tell them how many folks are going to be there. I tell them, it's just a little camera. It looks like a still camera on a little tripod. It's not a big thing. Or I'll say, well, there are going to be 10 of us and it's going to take us about 2 hours to set up and blah, blah, blah. But at least they understand what's going on. I also tell them that it's not going to be live, so it doesn't matter if they don't like their answer, we can stop and do it again. I let them know that I'll be pulling just little pieces out of their interview, not their entire interview, and I'll be editing it together later on. I let them know that I'd be happy to share it after I'm done, but they can't see the raw footage. And frankly, unless they're paying me to create the content, they don't have editorial say. Make certain that you do small talk, you keep them relaxed, but you don't talk about what you're hoping to cover in the interview. You don't want to, in essence, do your interview while you're setting up. You want the answers to be fresh. You want them to be thoughtful. They don't want to feel rehearsed or sort of concatenated because they've already kind of embellished it when you were talking before. Don't let them talk themselves out before you're actually doing the interview. If they ask, well, what are we going to talk about? It'll be something along the line of, it's exactly what we talked about on the phone. We're going to talk about X and Y. I'm not going to go anywhere else unless you want to go there, which is fine. But really, I'm going to focus on this area, exactly what we talked about. There'll be no surprises, I promise. And then I'll shift, what are you doing this weekend? Or what do you have for lunch? Or something that's innocuous, or how did you end up in Seattle? Who knows? But I'm not going to ask those important questions before it rolls. Do your homework on the topic. You need to be able to really have a clear understanding of what you want to accomplish and what the important points are in the topic that you're exploring. Mostly because that'll put you in a position to recognize a provocative answer, something that's surprising, something that's really interesting, so you can do a follow-up, so that you can recognize something. So if somebody's giving you good stuff, you can be giving them lots of great visual, nonverbal feedback that this is really interesting, this is good stuff. But you need to know the content well enough to be able to spot when they're giving you a good answer. When I first start my interview, I always ask of them to say and spell their name and what their title is. And I actually have that right on the file at the beginning of my interview, so that if I lose all the paperwork or if I'm gone and we want to repurpose the interview at some point in time, somebody can look at that file, look at that interview and know who it is. And even if they've changed jobs, the odds are they can find them. Nothing worse than having a great interview and having no idea who it was because all the paperwork was in a file drawer that got thrown out when you changed jobs. So it's a great way to protect yourself and make certain that the content can be reused. Ask open-ended questions that provoke a longer response. In other words, not yes or no, but it's tell me why, or what was going on, or walk me through how you got to this point, or what were you thinking about, or what led to that decision. Open-ended questions so that they have to embellish it. I'm sure many of you have already found out silence is golden. When you get to editing your interview, you can't remove your questions from the interview, which means you need to let them complete the answer, count to 1 or 2, and then ask the next one. You don't want to step on their answer, and especially you don't want to give the sort of verbal response that we do in normal conversation of affirmation. The ahas or oh or ah or tell me, don't step on them when they talk. You got to be quiet. And if they're not embellishing enough, sometimes just being quiet when they think they're done with their answer, just sitting there and going, makes them want to fill the void and talk more. Or they may ask you, is that it? And then you can say, no, feel free to embellish. When we talked on the phone, you talked about in greater detail, and I'd love to hear that detail. They'll get the message that you're really looking for them to talk more. That's why it's really important that you keep eye contact. I talked about how I don't look at my questions during interviews. I try to have it much more of a guided conversation. I go in doing my very best to have memorized what my questions are going to be and in what order. And then when I think I've got them all done, I'll pull out my questions, I'll look at them, see if I missed anything. And that avoids long fishing expeditions, but it also keeps them from having to talk to the ever-growing bald spot on top of my head. Ask the reflective question. Looking back, how would you have done it differently? Or what would you tell yourself if you could talk to yourself 10 years ago about what you know now? Things that cause them to reflect and consider and think about where they made their choices. And most of all, ask about their feelings. How did you feel when that happened? What made you think that you were going to be successful doing that? Knowing now, how does it make you feel? Really get them to talk about feelings. Video is a terrible place for facts. Litigation is a good place for facts, video not so good. And people want to hear why people did something, what they were thinking, what their motivation was, what they learned from it. That's where the connection comes from. That's where the emotional engagement comes from, because that's when people are learning things and projecting themselves into your video, going, oh, that could be me, or I've been in a situation like that. And that sort of engagement really makes a significant difference. 11 simple little tips about how to manage an interview. Once you have your interview, the next question is, how do we script it? Do you need a script? I almost never work from a script. I will get occasionally service. I use Rev to transcribe my interviews, and then I'll go through and maybe look at my interviews if there's something specific I'm looking for. But for me, I do it all in editing, where I just sit and watch and respond and find points where people are really engaged, and then from there winnow it down. So you don't have to have a script. Many people feel much better about understanding the structure of their story if they do have something in writing. One of the most enlightening things I ever heard about storytelling is structure. And that's absolutely true. Your audience wants you to guide them, and they want you to feel that it has structure, that it is taking them someplace, that it has a beginning, middle, and end. And so you need to make certain that your story has structure to it. There's a logic to it. It may feel like it unfolds naturally, but it's going to be most successful when there is a structure, an Act 1, an Act 2, and Act 3. You might be able to better arrive at that structure working off of a transcript or writing a script or doing something like that. For me, I tend to respond better to what I can see. Certainly extemporaneous is an option. Folks who just do it on the fly, much more like a subject matter expert or something like that. But most every video is going to improve if you write things down and take a look at how you're going to put it together. So the question then becomes, how do you script an interview? I think I mentioned in class I'm a big fan of spaghetti theory. As I talked about, throw it against the wall, see what sticks. When I'm in the research phase, I will literally grab anything and everything I can find and start putting it all into some sort of document. It might be links to a website or quotes or paragraphs or sentences or words that I find. It's just this random collection of stuff. And then I'll start organizing it, and then I'll start putting in pieces of interview that correspond to those. This is particularly true if I'm writing something with a voiceover, where a reporter or a narrator will be introducing voiceover. From there, I often create a 2-column script. These are pretty straightforward. You have all of the information that relates to video on the left side, and on the right side is all of the words that are being said. Voiceover or interview, whatever's being spoken within the context of your video, that's all in the right side. And this is a very classic sort of script format. It's used all over. Once I get a pretty good idea of what my script is, what the content is going to be, I'll go through and make certain that I have video footage that's going to illustrate in depth. And if I've got a big paragraph and one sentence of cover, it's like, wait a minute, is that just one shot? Because the odds are this is 20 seconds a copy, and one shot's not going to cover 20 seconds a copy. I got a problem, I'm going to have to solve it. So this is a way to try to figure out if you've got enough cover footage to tell your story and to illustrate what you're trying to do. Here's an example from long ago. When shooting with the flip, it's best to remember this mantra: embrace the limitations. You want to zoom? Forget about it. Walk closer to your subject. Zoom with your feet. But don't get too close. The camera's macro function is non-existent. Anything closer than about 18 inches, well, it goes out of focus fast. Well, if there's so many limitations, why do people love this camera? 2 words: portability and simplicity. You only got one red button back, and you can take the camera almost anywhere. So you can see here in this video that we've got indication of content that's on camera when shooting with the flip, and then footage of getting too close. And I knew I was going to need a couple of shots for that. And the next line down says, is this on camera or is the close-up shot of the flowers continued? I shot it both ways, giving myself options in editing. And in editing, it seemed too weird to be going from being in a polo shirt on the deck to suddenly being skiing. And so I used all of the cover footage of the flowers to bridge me moving 100 miles away up into the mountains. But this is a real clear idea of how I scripted out what I thought I was going to do before I even shot. There are other formats for creating scripts. You can do storyboard scripts. Storyboard script, often I'll just use clip art if I need to, which just helps somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience at video to pre-visualize what you have in mind, to be able to see a talking head and see B-roll footage, whatever it is. It helps you deal with the fact that a lot of folks don't do a very good job of imagining the same thing that you are imagining. In this case, I'm almost always working with someone else who's going to approve it or pay for it or whatever. So each row here is a separate type of content, and I put a number on each of them so that if we're discussing the script, it's not like, well, on page 3, instead it'll be, okay, in cell number 3, in that VO, we can find things really quickly. And then notes, often it's notes that get added during conversation, or it may be a better description or a problem or describing animation. So this is just a more complete way of being able to work your way through a script. This one, on the other hand, boy, what a goon. This one is something that I banged out really fast, and I didn't know when I was going to be on camera and when I was going to be doing cover footage. So I shot it all on camera, but I highlighted what I thought was going to be on camera, and that's how we ended up with this. It's pretty obvious that your photos and videos are better when they're in focus, but how do you do it with a smartphone? Let me show you how. It's as easy as touching the screen. Simply point at the object you want in focus. You'll see a box center on your fingertip that focuses the camera on what you've selected. Pretty easy. Here's the cool part. If you hold your finger in place, some text pops up on the screen. So you get the drift. So I gave myself options in editing. If you need a script template, there are lots of different script formats that are out there. This is on my webpage, which I haven't really tended to in like 2 years. And it's like the most visited part of my webpage. And literally it is script templates of different formats. This affords you the opportunity to download a different format or all the formats, have them at the ready, depending upon what your needs are. So that's something that may be able to help you out in your work. Okay, let's pivot. We're going to pivot over to how do you schedule and manage the production of all these content types. And looks like the dogs need to go outside. So let's see if we can pick this up there. So it's really important that you think about how you're going to do and maintain your production. There's a lot of moving parts, and it always takes longer than you think it's going to take. There's a reason why a lot of productions... Oh yeah. Yeah, you excited? Kisses. There's a reason why large teams, movies, television shows have production managers, because of all those moving parts and all this, yeah, and all those things that need to be put in place in order to do it. When managing a channel or trying to populate a channel with content, you need to make certain that you have gone through, get my coat, make certain you've gone through and allocated how long it's going to take to stay on top of those things. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, somebody wants to walk. Somebody wants to walk. Okay, okay, Ruby Jean. So it becomes critical that you think about how you are going to manage the process. Okay guys, let's go outside. Whoa. There we go. Okay, let's go downstairs. Okay, so it appears the dogs are taking me for a walk. So there's a real spectrum of content types out there. From the very top, the high end, which tends to be high visibility videos that will require a lot of production. They're likely to be seen by a lot of folks. And we attach a lot of production value to these, which usually means a large crew, a lot of people involved in the decision making, just a whole lot of folks who are have input and need to be managed. Because of that, we usually have much higher budgets for those things because of the resources involved. Those we most often farm out to an outside agency or something. They can be fun to do, but usually the likelihood that you're going to be able to deliver exactly what you had in mind and deliver something that's going to be meet or exceed the expectations of the people sending the checks, it's often best done by farming it out. And the bottom end of the content tends to be things that are almost mass produced. Could be subject matter expert videos, could be testimonials, event coverage. Those again, because they're high volume, tend to farm those out. And so when you're managing all of this content, you need to understand what's going to fall in what category. Where does your content land within the spectrum of content? It's the big middle part that we tend to do most in-house, or tend to be the content that's most likely to be produced within an organization. Those are profiles, higher production value, subject matter expert, things that are similar to what we've produced in class. Those tend to be the best return on the investment. You guys doing okay? Waiting for traffic to go by. So because all of these different types of content, you need to be thoughtful about the fact that each of them take a different amount of time to produce. You might be able to, oh boy, lots of traffic. I don't know if you can hear me or not. You need to be able to allocate the proper amount of time for each piece of content you're going to do. Some of the simple testimonial or subject matter stuff, you might be able to produce 5, 6, 7 of those in a day. You may have a very high profile video, and that may take 2 weeks to produce for one video. So in doing your production calendar, you have to understand that not every video is going to take the same amount of time, and you need to budget within your calendar appropriately. One of the things that I try to do when looking at a production calendar is really understand how much content am I looking to generate within a set amount of time. Am I looking to produce, let's say, a video a week? Well, if I'm producing a video a week, I may have some content that will take me, in essence, 2 weeks to generate. And I may have other pieces of content that may only take a day or two to produce. I may look at my calendar and say, well, it's realistic for me to be able to do one of those 2-week videos a month, and I can then spend a week creating 3 videos that are much lower production and start allocating time so that I do 3 videos that may only take 2 days each to produce because they're simpler, not as complicated, and in essence buy time for the 4th video so that I have 3 weeks of content that's being placed regularly scheduled in my channel, and in that time I'm able to then produce content that is going to have a higher production value, maybe have a higher profile. So then the question becomes, how do I manage a production calendar? How do I think about how much time I need to produce, how much time I need to write, how much time I need to allocate for editing and shooting? I like to start, in essence, backwards. When is my project due? You guys ready? Come on, let's go. Apparently we're not ready. Okay, let's go, bud. Come on. I like to try to start at the end and work backwards. So when is this due? Realistically, how long is it going to take to edit this project? How long is it going to take to write? how long is it going to take to shoot? How long is it going to take to do all of my pre-production and setup and producing ahead of time? If I figure a week for editing on a project and 2 days to shoot, 2 days to write, 1 day to prep, that's 2 weeks right there. But usually these videos don't stand alone. You're also managing other projects in parallel. So the 2 weeks you've allocated to create that content may take place over 3 or 4 weeks. So you need to be able to interleave all of these projects together. And that's where a production calendar comes in, so that you can really begin to make certain you're staying on top of these things. There are a lot of different ways to do production calendaring. One is analog. I'm a huge fan of analog. I have a client who absolutely lived for and was very successful with index cards. Each project would be broken into separate phases, and they had on one wall a massive calendar, and they used index cards and allocated what day was going to be shooting on a particular project, and they could look at 6 months at a glance to know when and where they were planning to shoot or edit, and what project was going on, and what events were also scheduled that they needed to be responsive to, and being able to work ahead. And when they were trying to figure out their production, they would just go in and remove the thumbtacks holding up the index cards for a particular project and start shuffling stuff around. And it was incredibly effective. It was also analog, not digital, which meant in order to really be able to see the calendar, you had to go in and stand in the conference room and look at the wall. There are a number of digital options out there. Farmer's Wife is one. That's software that's specifically designed for media production. I use Excel a lot. I use Outlook a lot. It just really depends upon what's going to work best for you. You just need to be able to choose something and stick to it. Because without a production calendar, frankly, you're going to be toast. So analog versus digital, it really doesn't matter. It's really dependent upon what works for you. What this means is you really have to make certain you identify the variables. How long is it going to take to shoot? How long is it going to take to set up the shoot? How long is it going to take to set up the story? You need to identify those variables before you start shooting, and really as you start working out your calendar. My number one recommendation, particularly when you have a number of people who are participating in the production, it's not just you. My number one recommendation is create a gatekeeper. Make certain there's one person in charge of the calendar, make certain that there are no surprises, they're able to communicate, and that person is able to allocate what resources are used when. That becomes really important to make certain that you stay on track, stay on budget. Just understand you're going to live and die by your gatekeeper, and that person really is the keys to the kingdom and is super important to make certain that you're going to be able to deliver what you expect and keep it within the expected costs of the project. So if this all feels overly confusing, know that we do have some resources available for you. Hold on, guys, let me get your leash off. First of all, I did a rather extensive website entry. Go ahead, guys, go on in. Go on, Ruby. I did an extensive website that will walk you through all the phases of production management, the difficulty of getting management buy-in, some of the complexities. There are also other resources available. Here in the PowerPoint, you'll find a number of resources. These are hyperlinks that you can just click on, and they'll help you shape a lot of the decisions that you make for creating a production calendar, and specifically with this project, help you to understand what you need to include and what are some of the dynamics involved. Really what I'm looking for in the final project is for you to be thoughtful about how much content you can realistically make with the size of the team you have. Planning on producing a video every day is not sustainable. Planning on doing 3 videos a week where 2 of them are really easy to put together and 1 of them is more complex, that becomes sustainable. But you need to make certain your production calendar doesn't require everybody on the team to work 7 days a week. That'll work for about 3-4 months and then folks just get burned out. So if you do a production calendar, and I do recommend you do it because it really will help you understand the challenges involved in feeding the beast of video. You need to make certain that it's going to be realistic and sustainable, and that it is the balance point between constantly creating fresh content so that you're a reliable resource for your viewers, and also making certain that you don't burn out the staff, that it's going to be sustainable over time. Okay, let's get in. Okay, and we're back. So let's wrap up this little video extravaganza with a little bit of a 40,000 view of transmedia storytelling. I would wager many of you already know about it. It was had sort of a vogue a few years ago, and it is used all the time, but not necessarily identified specifically as transmedia storytelling. But I would wager that you're all very familiar with it. What is transmedia storytelling? Well, the idea is content that moves across multiple channels of communication, so that there are parts of the story that may exist in graphic novels, that may exist as films, that may exist as television shows, as web series, as web pages. And each of these different channels are telling a different part of the story. That together they build a much richer, more complete story, but each of these individual channels stand on their own in their own merit. That a part of a story is leveraging the best part of whatever channel it's in. And this content also can have multiple authors, but it's all within the same universe. Where it came from was about 15 years ago, a professor at MIT, a guy by the name of Henry Jenkins, came up with this idea of the value of being able to use coordinated storytelling across all these platforms to make characters and then ultimately stories more compelling, to make them deeper, richer, more complex. As he said, consumers have become information hunters and gatherers, taking pleasure in tracking down character backgrounds and plot points and making connections between different texts within the same franchise. Okay, that still doesn't really necessarily tell us what transmedia storytelling is. And there are a couple of examples that come to mind right away. Pokemon is the quintessential example of this idea of telling different parts of the story in different mediums. It unfolds across games, television programs, films, books, and no one of those medium have privilege over the other. They each tell a separate part of the story, and each is rich. And, you know, when you think of what happened with Pokemon Go, we then had a new way to develop this story, which was interactive, where you were driving this game within the context of the characters that you knew in your own environment. A real interesting application of a transmedia narrative applied where you had a lot of control. And that's sort of an interesting way to think about the fact that you, in essence, were authoring a story around your interaction with Pokemon Go and the experiences you had. And the narrative that you wrote was unique to you and your voice. Well, that's one application, but you also may find fan fiction in other properties. You may find some things that are written by an author, some things that are written by a screenwriter, some that are written by a producer. And these different authors, these different storytellers can weave these really complex narratives. And that is very, very rewarding. The challenge, though, is with these different channels and with these different authors, making certain that you stay consistent in both the voice of the characters, the environment that's created, and the development of the plot. You think about a program like Lost, where it was so complex and interwoven. They had people, well, Doctor Who is another great example, where they have people whose full-time job is just to track what's happened to the characters so that when a new script gets written or something new gets written, it doesn't go against something that's happened previously, because the community would start to distrust the narrative. You need to honor what's happened in the past and then build on it. In The Matrix, as an example, the franchise had key bits of information that are conveyed through 3 live-action films, animated shorts, collections of comic books, video games. And again, there's no one single source of text where you can turn to gain all the information. To get a complete view of The Matrix, you need to be able to pull information and background and depth from all of these different channels, and it creates a much richer experience. A number of years ago, the New York Times created this incredible multimedia experience called Snowfall, and it literally took everyone by storm. Let's see if I can bring this up. So this document, this article that was written, was a very rich multimedia experience. It was a very long, complicated story where they used sound bites and pieces from the story.
I had no ability to control what was happening to me.
Where they're using pieces of interview interwoven with the written story. And these video elements and these 3D maps and all of these sorts of rich interactive things absolutely captivated a whole slew of multimedia content creators trying to figure out, wow, this is so captivating, how can we do this again? There has yet to be another Snowfall that has managed to captivate people's attention, but I really recommend, if you have an opportunity, dig through this article. It may have been a few years old, but
Skiing powder is one of the few things that nature offers that gives you such a rush, a high, but a feeling of contentment, of pureness, of bliss.
I can't recommend enough what they accomplished here. But it is all simply within this New York Times website. And what folks are trying to do is come up with the next Snowfall, the next format of storytelling that leverages this sort of transmedia value. They've been gathering for a decade trying to plan some sort of multimedia content that rivals the effect that Snowfall had, or at least some sort of different sort of platform-specific presentation of content that leverages the best of mobile, of print, of online video, being able to take advantage of the strength of each of the platforms. The bottom line is that transmedia storytelling is this process where all sorts of elements of fiction or nonfiction get dispersed systematically across all of these different channels. It's most often referred to these days as multi-platform storytelling, and that's used to describe this technique of telling a story using several formats. And you really want it to have some form of involvement with the users, with the audience, with the viewers. And I would argue that the reason why multi-platform storytelling is so powerful is, as humans, we tell stories at different times. We usually do it to illustrate something, to persuade someone, to teach someone, to amuse them, to entertain them. And we're going to adjust how we tell that story based upon what we want to accomplish. But it's also how we make sense of the world in communicating our understanding to others. And we might be able to take in these isolated facts and random events, but really what we long to do is innately tie these things together so they make sense both to ourselves, but especially to someone else. You want to connect the dots to create cause and effect, to construct some sort of plot that makes sense. We do this with story. And the value in transmedia storytelling is, how might this story look from a different perspective, from a different character standpoint? What happened to the characters after the ending of a movie? What happened before the movie began? How else might this story be told? And it really allows you to tell rich, unique stories. But as I said, each medium makes its own unique contribution to the story. And as users engage across these multiple platforms, they make a series of personal choices that shape and define their experience. Oh, I'm bored with this. Oh, I'm interested in this. And it affords them the opportunity to control and manage how they get through the story. So modern media companies, and frankly all companies who are looking to find new ways to engage an audience, are looking to hold attention across this range of different media industries, looking to horizontally integrate their content. And that's in many ways what transmedia can afford. It allows you to diversify your channels for the content that you're doing, make certain that you've got the right content in the right channel. It allows you to tell really complex stories where it's not based on an individual character, but maybe a situation, might be a plot. It's almost world building within these individual things all the time while respecting the larger narrative and constructs. Each of these individual platforms, each of these individual narratives need to be able to stand on their own. It needs to be this sort of additive comprehension so that people understand things better. And it becomes this sort of collective intelligence, both among the viewers, but also among those of us creating the content, so that you get these almost kind of social structures that emerge out of this sort of storytelling. And participants can pool their information together, tap each other's expertise, solve problems in understanding the plot or the character. These become very deep, rich worlds, which is why they're most often in fiction rather than nonfiction. But a transmedia narrative is really, really powerful. And most of all, transmedia isn't new. We've done this, telling stories around the campfire and then showing the same story on a cave painting, I would imagine, could be construed as transmedia. Telling the story in written form in the Bible and in stained glass and in iconostasis. Each one of these mediums telling the same story or a part of the same story, but leveraging the strength of that medium to make it deeper and richer. So transmedia isn't necessarily new. What is significant is that with the internet and with digital technology, the speed of creating and distributing and consuming this content is really powerful. the variety of platforms, which then afford the variety of content types and the variety of pieces of information that you populate into that content, your reach, being able to do it globally. And as we talked about with Pokemon Go, or as I talked about with Pokemon Go, the interactivity of today's platforms really show great value. There are some problems, particularly in corporate environments, because typically you're going to find a lot of redundancy, particularly with licensing systems that are involved in this content, where there's no new character background. It's just retelling in the same background that you had before. Maybe not a new plot. It's just illustrated as a comic book. You're not building on it. You know, it's just watering down and duplicating the experience they had before. And the biggest problem is creating contradictions, not respecting the sort of core consistency that a franchise has developed over time and that the audience are expecting. And that typically is one of the biggest problems, particularly in corporate environments, is they just want to tell the same story in every channel. And not only is that not transmedia or multi-platform storytelling, it's not the best way to leverage the benefits of transmedia storytelling. So, if you have a chance to leverage this, I highly recommend it. It's complex, it's hard, it's really fun, it's really interesting. Some of the keys to success is that each story, each piece must be enriching, but can't be essential to understanding the story. They need to be able to stand on their own as stories, add to the whole, but it can't be something where if somebody doesn't engage in it, they don't understand the rest of the story. You also need to make certain your storytelling is not confined by distribution channels. You need to make certain that your storytelling is less confined by specific distribution channels, that they take on this sort of fluid, reactive, flexible new forms that adapt to the channels that you've chosen, and that no one manifestation or platform is necessary for the understanding of the bigger picture. It should be a part of the whole, but not so critical that the whole falls apart. Okay, so this is the end of our grand experiment. If you've made it this far, I'm shocked you're still awake. Hopefully it's somewhat coherent and helps you out. And I really appreciate you writing it out. Hopefully there's information here you can use. I really look forward to seeing you on Monday for the final class. As I said, please make certain you've rehearsed your content ahead of time. It's probably best to bring your presentation in on a thumb drive. Sometimes it takes a long time to get laptops connected to the system and get the audio working. It certainly can be facilitated. We have both a digital connection, a DisplayPort connection, and a 9-pin, depending upon what your, and HDMI, depending upon what your laptop may use. But I would make certain you've got your presentation probably backed up on portable media just in case something doesn't work, so you're not hung out to dry. I wish you all the best of luck. We're going to try to get started right at 6 o'clock. Because it's going to be a long evening. We'll definitely take a break in the middle. Probably do 2 groups and then 3 groups. And that's about it. You can email me or text me while I'm away if you have a real significant problem. I will be gone, dark 30 Monday morning. I think I have to get out of the house like 4 a.m. And in theory, get back on Friday, but I won't be surprised if it's not Saturday. If I do get back on Friday, I'll be in Portland over the weekend. So I will be back really not until the Sunday before final. You do not have to submit anything on Canvas until the Wednesday after the last class. You certainly can before that. And only one of you needs to submit it. And I have to reinforce, please make certain that you annotate who's responsible for each section of your presentation, because I want to be able to celebrate and give give points and awards for those who have done exceptional work, and make certain that I can keep everybody in good shape. So with that, I think we're done. I'm out of here.